Good morning, everyone, in, one of my several classes, either U.S. History 1, U.S. History 2, uh, American Government and Political Science, or the History of the Constitution. I thought I'd put up a brief note about the research paper that is expected of you during the course of the semester. It's a very modest paper. I believe it's 1,000 words, which comes roughly out to 4 pages double spaced, 2 pages if it were single. And I'm going to put up a rubric and some further expectations about what that paper will be in written form later, but it's usually going to be double spaced. You want to get in the habit of doing that academically, so an instructor or somebody reviewing it with you has an easier time not only reading the document, but also to put in edits or suggestions between the typed lines. It makes it a much easier job to review. So it's a very modest paper. It's also not the most significant portion of your grading. So why am I doing it? Just to torture you? I know when I'm a student or have been a student, I dread having to do research and writing papers as well. And as you get further along in your education, you're going to probably find you might be doing a lot more research and writing assignments than you ever had hoped for. But the reason I want to assign it, especially on such a de minimis minor level, 4 pages is not a lot of work, is to get you in a habit of hopefully enjoying the process. Why? Because that's what life's going to be about. It's going to be problems that are going to confront you, your business, your industry, your goals, whatever it is you're involved in. And you have to find answers or solutions or methods by which you deal with these kind of things that come up in your careers or even in your personal life. So what do you do when you have a problem? You go and you look for answers. And that's the research aspect of it. And once you find good, credible pieces of information, you want to assimilate that and then basically come to a conclusion. All we want to do in the long run is we may have to present that information to somebody else to convince them that's the answer to the question that was at hand. And how do we do that? Well, we use credible sources, one, but two, we have to articulate our findings. That's the written portion of it. I am a fairly liberal grader. I know the intimidation that goes into a writing project can be very heavy for students. I know they are, or it has been historically for me as well too. But over time, you're going to see that the reason why we're doing it is to build up the skills, hopefully to take away a little of the intimidation in the process, and to help you become a better researcher, or maybe your first-time researcher, and to become a better writer. There's a lot of pedagogical evidence, educational research done to suggest the more you write, even if you're starting off very poorly, the more you do it, the more adept and skilled you'll get over time through the process of being involved in it, being involved in writing. I will help you along through the process, but many students have been contacting me and saying, "Oh, what's the topic? What do I pick?" It's any topic related to your course, very widespread. Some are in U.S. History 1, anything related to persons, events, themes, trends that happened basically during the early colonialization period of the United States of America up until Reconstruction just after Civil War. You can do biographies about individuals. You can do about a specific event, historical event. You can do it about a specific battle if you think that's interesting enough. And the reason why I want you to pick the topic is because I'm hopeful that by you having the liberty of choosing the topic, it'll take away a little bit of the drudgery of having to do a research project on something you just totally despise. Now, I know many of you probably despise the entire class, but of all the things you go through in U.S. History 1, U.S. History 2, History of the Constitution, and political science and government, there's got to be something that has a little bit of interest for you, and you can go and do a little bit of research and write up a relatively modest paper using hopefully pretty consistent citation form. I'll get into that later when I put up the rubric about how the paper should be presented. But I don't care if you want to use MLA citation form or the more civic APA, which is the more, I believe, in the more hard sciences. Those that are historians often use something called the Chicago style of citation. Myself as a lawyer, I tend to use something called the Blue Book of Legal Citation as a form. I just want you to be consistent with your citations. So why even bother with it? Why do this to me, right? Why are you doing this to me, Corman? Because when you go out and try to convince somebody that Andrew Jackson had this sort of historical set of experiences during his life, maybe prior to the presidency, through the presidency, biography piece, if you will, you have to convince the reader that the sources you used were legitimate and you, in fact, just didn't make it up out of thin air. That's why we cite sources. This is especially true of those of you that want to be in law enforcement or become an attorney or anything like that, the court doesn't usually care too much about what we feel. The court wants to know why the law requires us to find in a certain to come to a certain conclusion as a result of that. And so we often have to cite law or cases that help steer the court in a certain direction in our favor. You can't just say because it's the right thing to do. I mean, sometimes we do those bold global arguments, but for the most part, we're citing historical precepts or statutes that require a certain outcome. And the same is true if you're trying to convince me of what were the causes of the American Revolutionary War. I mean, they're obviously multifaceted, but you're going to list them and you're going to cite an article or a book you read. Now, here's one thing I do want to make just a friendly suggestion. Unless you have a ton of time, I'd avoid reading several novels about a topic for you to write this research paper. There are excellent scholarly articles available through the internet. And over time, you'll get to know whether or not it's a valid source, especially if it's published from a college or a college academic center, or if it's from something that's been recognized as something that has validity and integrity, like the Smithsonian, or the Constitutional Center, or different universities, like I said earlier. The Mount has several portals for excellent research articles. And why am I suggesting articles? Because why read a book for 400 pages? I prefer you did if you had the time, but you don't. So it'd be nice if you could read about, 4 or 5 good articles that are between, 6 or 7 pages, maybe 10 pages in length. And you can extrapolate some information and report it back to me. I want you to have fun with the project. Pick something that makes you at least curious. And I am not nearly as concerned about, is it a real weighty topic? Is it a very fascinating topic? I want it to be interesting to you, because these research and writing skills will transfer and be interrelated to whatever you write and do research about later on. It's more about a skill building practice than it is about finding substantive knowledge about new areas. I mean, hopefully you do find some related to the topic of the course, but it's more about getting better at writing, better at doing research, and taking away that which we all fear, which is the intimidation of doing these kinds of projects will hopefully become a little less sharp and a little less disturbing, for lack of a better way of saying it, in the heat of the moment. When you do tackle a research and writing project, they should actually be somewhat fun. It's self-education, and let's face it, no one should be educated by anybody other than their own good intent and their own striving desire to inquire about why things are like they are, than having it spoon-fed by some professor that might have a philosophical philosophy that's very much slanted in the way they're presenting it, or some other mouth, breather, so to speak, that's trying to convince you of certain aspects. Convince yourself. Have the courage and the wherewithal to go out and research questions that you think are important to you and come up with your own conclusions about what happened historically, or about what the causes of something might be, or the best way in which to remedy a problem going forward in the future. It's a very empowering tool to be able to do research and writing. So try to have fun with it, and I'll help you along the way. And I do mean that. I've already talked to several students on the phone who've been calling me with some concerns about, what do I pick? What do you expect on this thing? I really want to do well. Papers have always thrown me off. I'll help you through the process. And we're going to do eventually I'll have a specific schedule up where I'll expect you to have a topic picked by a certain day. And maybe you should tell me what some of your sources will be, some of the articles you maybe found, or a book if you're going to read one or two. And then eventually we're going to have an outline due date, and then we're going to have finally a rough draft. And I'm here to help you. So if you're really way off track, or if you seem like you're doing way too big a project, or you're doing something so very esoteric and narrow that you can't find material on, I'll try to help you go on a path where there's more resources available to you, and help organize some of the thoughts or your thesis statement, if you will, in terms of the organization of what your goal is in writing your paper. Other than that, I really am here to help. Don't let this be intimidating. It's a very low-stake project. And the more you do these things, the better off you're going to be in the long run, no matter what your career is, or what your employment, or just even life skills are. This is an essential life skill, being able to do some basic research to find answers to questions that are on your mind, or required for you to find in your career, and to be able to articulate those findings to some supervisor, coworker, or audience in some fashion. It's a very powerful tool, and I hope you embrace it. Otherwise, don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. Again, I'll have a rubric up pretty soon, and if I haven't already put the due dates for all the different sections on there in your specific course, they will be up shortly, I promise.